Hello, it's Tuesday the 1st of September and I'm Rob Watson and this is a Decentered media vlog, and I've not done one of these for a while from home. I had been trying to get out and about, but the rubbish weather that we'd had over the summer kind of defeated me. So of course, today, which is the first day of the schools going back here in Leicester, what happens? The sun's out and it's nice and bright and sunny, and all the work I had planned to do kept me at my desk for the morning, but I did manage to get out for a couple of hours this afternoon. What I want to chat about just for a few minutes is something I'm starting to think about in anticipation of where, if you like, decentered media goes in the future, and what is the direction of travel that I want to consider and to look at in order to make improvement, development, and widen the net of people who are getting involved, and also to see where we need to align with other allies to make common cause, if you like. And one of the issues is I want to start to write a little bit more about and be a bit more direct about, probably as a response to the lockdown and the challenges of the pandemic, is what does community media have to do with progressive politics, really? And in many ways, a lot of community media is depoliticized, or it's political with a small p. So there's infighting between people and groups, as with any other kind of civic, community, commercial sector that happens. But the big P politics is kind of community media as adrift, in my view, and that it's not really got any traction or much traction with the policy making process. And I think the evidence for this is really, the disaster of the communications process that the government relied upon and depended upon with COVID. And local government and public health organisations and civic sector organisations have relied on a particular kind of model of communication which is no longer fit for purpose. But the problem is that there hasn't been sufficient work done to look at and to consolidate an alternative. So my thinking has come in two ways. The other week I did a podcast with Natalie Fenton and Des Friedman, who are involved with the media reform campaign, and the analysis of our overreaching, over-controlling, over-influential mass media is absolutely correct. Excuse me. And that we need to start to look at how we re-regulate media. Don't just leave it to the marketplace. We need to look at how we make it more civically accountable, both nationally and locally. And we need to look at forms and models of media that can be responsive to ordinary people in their communities at a local level. But the politics around that, and I agree with that prognosis, the politics around that are not necessarily lined up to be able to then look at what has happened within community media groups, organisations, the community media movement in the last 10 years, and really kind of take lessons from that and use it as an example of a progressive model of politics. So I've been listening to the Compass podcast, which Compass is a progressive pressure group, I suppose. It's non-party anymore. It is cross-party. So people from the SNP, from the Green Party, from the Liberal Democrats come and engage in discussion in these podcasts. Neil Lawson leads them. And it's a broader discussion about what we need to do to change and kind of win power to put in place a more progressive agenda. But each of these discussions, and they're fascinating, they get so far as media is concerned, and they get to a point where we talk about social reform, and there's a lot of talk about civic engagement and how we need to change the democratic process, how we need to change the policy development process, how we need to allocate budgets in a different way. So things like citizens' juries, panels, citizens' panels, direct engagement, all of these things are discussed. But when it comes to media, it's kind of absent, or it's regarded as an add-on in terms of how we make a platform to communicate additionally. Afterwards, after we've made after the people have made their decisions, then we'll inform people about that. And I suppose my argument is that we need to embed our expectations about media and about communication at the start of the process, at the heart of the project, and not something that we add on later on as a kind of marketing tool. And once we've decided what this is about, then we have to explain it to people. That kind of model is broken, and I think the frameworks that people use to communicate are also dysfunctional. They're clearly not working. The message, even the language that we use is problematic these days. So things like the Compass podcasts talk about cultural identity, ethnic identity, national identity, the difference. Lisa Nandy gave a good overview. She's the Shadow Foreign Secretary now. She gave a really great overview of her work with local towns. And I remember living in Melton Mowbray in the 20s, the noughties, and really kind of feeling left out from politics because you never got any visits from anybody, you never got any resources. I was campaigning for the Labour Party at the time, and as a small town, it wasn't on the agenda. It was a very conservative town anyway, but it was kind of almost as if if you went in the big cities, you didn't get any love and attention. Or what they call the heartlands, the red wall, as the kind of really preposterous phrase is being bandied about. So this kind of raises a lot of issues for me in terms of how do we get community media to be respected, and how do we get community media to be incorporated into the policy development process, and how do we demonstrate that community media makes a difference? So the kind of three aspects I would want to see happen or want to see discussed is, first of all, I have this rather kind of blunt expression, which is if you want better media, you've got to make it yourself. And DIY politics, DIY media, and there's a description of I think it's John Harris talks about it in Devon or Cornwall or Dorset, where he lives. Of the council has adopted a flat pack council model where resident citizens are expected to participate in the construction of their local democracy themselves. And I think that's great. We've heard about the Preston model, where there's a movement towards a circular economy of local determination and local investment, and doing things in a way that suit local needs, not just waiting for a large developer to come to town or to attract international conglomerates, but really looking at the roots and looking at the ecosystem of businesses and social sector organisations. And it's this notion of social value and the idea that we don't just have to relate things in terms of the economic output that we get, but we look at the social gain and we look at what difference a project makes in terms of what it delivers to the quality of people's lives, people's well-being. And rather than just looking at GDP, we look at well-being, we look at holistic, sustainable, resilient models of growth and development, rather than dashes for expedient, technologically, risky models of growth. So on that level, you've then got the question of, well, how do we know that our media can make a difference? And people are often fatalistic about this. It's like, our media is controlled by, Rupert Murdoch, Bauer, Global, the BBC, ITV, and Netflix. and now you've got Apple, Google, and these big transnational corporations. And the argument is that the BBC has to be able to compete with these organisations. And it's like, well, really, we kind of need to be changing the framework. Reform of the BBC is long overdue in terms of civic accountability, in terms of making sure that people are involved in the process of co-developing content and structures and governance of the BBC. And it's not just handed down to people by experts. That was the old way of doing things. Now, the new way of doing things is to really break that apart and decentralise the process. And then likewise, how do we know that anybody's doing a decent job? How do we know that people are actually making a difference? And I think this is where there's some interesting work to be looked at, so that we can start to think about how we look at evaluation tools and we look at processes where you say, it's filling out a form for funding. When I've done a little bit of this over the last few weeks for different community radio stations, is, how many people are involved and how will they benefit from the project? Well, we've got a group of volunteers who are involved in the project and they benefit in this way, but then we've got 20,000 listeners and they benefit in this way. Oh, that's great, but can you prove any of that? No, because we can't do mass audience research. We don't have the resources to get in to, do surveys and the time it takes and the intensity of it. Community media just can't do that. So we've got to change the framework of evaluation. We've got to change the way that we think about how social gain is valued, undertaken, and how it's delivered and what difference it makes. And we need to look for different markers. And there's a lot of that with the kind of civic sector reform models and the way that we think about, life experience, lived experience as being an essential part. It can't just be a technocratic process, but we have to actually, encourage people to get involved in the process. And in doing that, people will then be able to share stories, talk about issues that are of concern to them. And yes, there's a process of education about what would be mutually, sustainable, in terms of you don't want just somebody coming on and being vitriolic or nasty about people, because there's an accountability that needs to be built into. This is why it's different from social media. Community media has this core difference from social media, which is on social media you can just post what you want. You're accountable to yourself and some guy who runs an algorithm in California. That's how it seems to me. There's this vacuum of accountability. Whereas community media turns around and says, and many people do this using social media platforms, to say, no, we've got a moderation policy. No, there are certain things that are that we don't allow discussion of. There are certain things and actions that we know are harmful and that are detrimental or don't fit within our values. You can't just come on and have a free-for-all with people. And I think that is, the values and the model of community media. There's a lot to learn about a sustainable, ethical, resilient model of communication, which is different from the commercial model and the kind of corporate commercial model that we've got, and then also the kind of state-run model, which is the BBC, which is quite bureaucratic and technocratic and does things for you. So I'd like an opportunity to try and think about who we need to talk to develop more podcasts, to engage in more conversations about what really is the progressive agenda, how can we take it forward, how can we build alliances, and where will it go? What is the future path for an alternative model of media that isn't just a free-for-all, that doesn't divide people, but actually brings people together and gives them something, helps them to build for themselves a meaningful social experience through media. Anyway, I'll keep posting more regular blogs. I'm going to do them from my study a little bit more often. I've created a new picture wall. I've moved my desk around so I can actually get to the windows now. I might try and get out and still do more as I get out and about, because they are quite good to do, even though I'm terrible at them. But if you want to get in contact with me, the website is decentered.co.uk, and I'm on Twitter and Instagram. Just look for Decentered Media. So any messages, any ideas of who's going to be part of this progressive conversation, please do get in touch and let me know. But until next time, Thank you very much.